Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome back to part number 2. We are now close to our top of descent. We would start our descent in a moment here into Aalborg Airport. So here we go. We are setting and lower altitude now and starting our flight level change here, and we would reduce the thrust here. Here we go, reducing the thrust, and then we would maintain the 300 knots in our descent here. And yeah, the aircraft looks pretty okay. Nice interior, as you would know. And one thing that I really want to show you is a feature that was more or less something that I found when I actually was sitting here by the trade table a long time ago, I should say. And it is actually this push here, and you can see playing music, and then it would play music for us. Bit of classic music you can hear with a nice touch the developer has made there. That's what I personally mean. It's a well thought thing, you can say. Okay, and we are 87 nautical miles away from Aalborg VOR station, or AEL, as you can say, Alpha Alpha Lima, and we would start planning our landing here. So we would go in here. We can't see it yet, what the weather is at Aalborg, sadly, but I guess the wind might be something like we should land at runway 26 right, transition Aalborg VOR station, then we can go in. So it's inbound, and that we're just gonna say this one and this one. One thing that I mean is it would not get us correctly in towards the runway when we do that, but luckily we are pilot enough so we can deal with those kind of scenarios. So that's what we have to do. That's a very important skill to have, so we are actually aware of how we can deal with the situation. Okay, now we can get the information here. Wind at 320 degrees and 5. It would say 320. Yeah. So now we have set the wind direction. It's very handy way of actually doing it, because then you actually know from which direction the wind is coming, as such, you can say. Okay, we could also listen to the 80s, and here comes one thing that I really wish they would do, and it is that you could just click the frequencies here, because it is a bit funny that if I go over to the low in route or high in route, I can tune the nav 1 if I would like to. That's a bit funny that I'm able to do that when I'm actually not able to set up the frequency for the airport. From my perspective, I would say it's a bit odd. Okay, we're coming in here nicely towards Aalborg. You can see the wind direction is slowly turning now as we are descending, and it makes a lot of sense when we looked at where it should be when we actually get closer to Aalborg. And now we got into the clouds with that flashing strobe light. But just as it is in reality, it is not entirely sure that we would be flying to the Aalborg Mjøa station. Probably we would be flying a bit parallel with the runway and then make a left-hand turn in, just like they would do in reality. So yeah, and that's a bit of a funny thing, because people are often wanting sits and stars and such, and I understand it. Developers are then trying to say, well, they normally do not follow all of it, and that's entirely true. If you take routes like for Paris or something, that is just S-turn after S-turn. From what I have seen, I have actually never been flying those procedures, but I actually seen them, and you just think, yeah, right. But in theory, the only reason they are done is, of course, it takes off the pressure from air traffic controllers. But it is nice that they are there, because for other airports there are special procedures and such, and it is very nice to have them and be able to skip them and use them as required, because that's how real life is. Sometimes they do stuff, and it is important that we can do whatever is required. Okay. And now I would use a bit of speed brakes here, because as you can see at our map, we are actually getting pretty close to Aalborg right now, and we are at 30,000 feet. So it makes a lot of sense to actually use our speed brakes. That it is fully extended, well, that's not realistic. The MD-80 is one of those aircraft that actually can extend the speed brakes the most, from what pilots of that aircraft actually has said, and I guess that's pretty true, because now I have been flying in the MD-80s, and well, it really feels like a big guy pulling in the back of the aircraft when you use it. You really feel the force when they actually use those speed brakes in that old aircraft, and it is really big, because it is so powerful. It really is powerful. But again, it is funny that an aircraft actually is built the way it actually is, because if you ask some of the pilots, they actually say, was it some of the components actually was back to the DC freeze or something like that. I mean, there was some the window handles or something like that. I mean, they said was actually some of the same mechanisms. So yeah, it can be that it was some old technology, but again, it was working, and that's very important, because that's worth a lot when that is the case. Here you really see what I mean about what I mentioned in the previous version, that out here in the country it looks more realistic here in X-Plane with the cars and such. You see, of course, in the cities, just as Edinburgh, but again, looks a bit different here when we get to Aalborg than what we saw in Edinburgh. But now we are getting close to our target altitude. I could set it for 3000 if I would like to, or 4000 even, and I guess we would set it for 4000 at the moment, basically because we are low now. Actually, we got down a bit too early, but again, as we have to make the turn in towards the airport in just a moment, it makes good sense that we have great visibility. So we actually can see the ground, and we can get the aircraft in the right position, as well as being slowed down. But again, I have to admit that I speeded up the process a bit too early with the descent. But again, it is difficult now when I actually, or it's not even just me, but when you are flying a lot of aircrafts, they are behaving quite differently. So of course, just like in reality, the more you fly the aircraft, the better you are at predicting things, and you can say that, of course. Because back in the days when I just fly the 737, you just know when to descend and all that kind of stuff. Yes, I know the aircraft can tell you and all that stuff, but that's not always reliable information, because if I have a headwind or tailwind, it might not be the right moment to make the decision to descend. Okay. If I want to do what I was mentioning before, I can go in here and make a fixed point for Aalborg. Also, I could go in and say if there are some minimum safe altitudes, I could set that up. But again, I just want to set it for the wind component. I can go in and say I want a heading of 320, and you can see that now it actually makes the green line. I could of course also have made a line when we should start our descent. I could do that by inserting our reference, that is Aalborg, and then say, well, at 100 nautical miles I know I should be descending. There is an old method that's an pilot used for a book you could purchase. There came a snippet of it with the Wilco 737 back in the days. I actually got that book, or not that, the entire book. I got the little snippet that was included, and there was very useful information. There stated that take your current altitude and extract the altitude you would get to, and then you get a value, multiply it by 3, and then round it up to the closest whole number. Then you, let's say it was 27 or something, that it would be 30. Of course it was not in that range. His calculation was around 90 nautical miles from the reference point at which altitude he should be at. But again, very useful tip there. But the reason I did not continue is that right now I would actually need to switch to the heading mode, because now we are deviating from our current route. Not that much, but we are trying to fly a bit parallel with the airport without actually crossing the airfields, or I should say the main airport terminal, because you're normally not allowed to do so, and that's of course due to safety. But down there we got Aalborg Airport by Vidane Design, I should say. Very talented developer, John. Yeah, he makes great content for FSX and Prepared, and for X-Plane, luckily. Not sure what made him change, or what made him decide to actually develop for X-Plane, because at some point I actually showed him his rendition of Billund and said, well, if it might be an option, but then time passed by and suddenly we got Aalborg first, and then Billund came, and I'm very happy about it, that it actually came out, because it's good for the community that we actually have a new destination in the simulator, and especially now that it is such a talented developer, it would be sad if it didn't came out, I would say. And that's it. Okay, we are getting close here. We're down to 2,000 feet, and we can see the lights is blinking its way in towards the runway, and we are still in the progress of decelerating here, as well as now we can lower the landing gear. That would cause a bit of extra drag here in order to slow down. We can see we can't rely entirely on the weather report, because right now we actually has a bit of headwind. Let's see if it has updated the details for the wind. Yeah, there we go. Wind at 26, yeah. I should say 20 degrees, 6 knots. So in fact, our information is wrong, and there really is only or there is actually two options. Either we could turn around once more and then try to get ready for the landing from the opposite direction, or we could just continue as planned, and that's what we are going to do. It is entirely safe, and it is also allowed. There's just one thing we should know as a pilot when we actually take this decision, or I should say any pilot shall know, is that if we continue our desired approach here, of course we should always ask air traffic control, but if we get permission by air traffic control, we can do so. The only thing is that if something goes wrong, there's always a responsibility for the captain. However, if this fails, the responsibility is higher, because the aircraft is capable of doing it, but you have to assure that you are also capable of doing this maneuver safely. So if things goes wrong, it would be worse for yourself, because you have taken more responsibility on your shoulders by doing so. Because we are within the limits of the aircraft, but again, it is us that has some extra responsibility. That is what I have heard from real-world pilots. So that's something you should be aware of if you choose to do this kind of approach. And of course I only say this if you just want to do it just a bit like in reality, or you of course want to do it as realistic as possible. That would be the consequences that you should be aware of. And we are floating quite a lot right here, and I'm not sure if you actually noticed it, but I did not notice that touchdown as such. It actually felt quite smooth. Or it could be I missed something, but we are safely down now at Aalborg Airport, and I can only say that I hope you enjoyed the flight and landing here on board our Bombardier Challenger 300 and the main flight. We vacated the runway a bit late due to the fact that we floated, or I thought we floated, but I actually guessed we actually had touched down. The lighting and such actually made it a bit difficult to judge. So that's it. Else it was just me that was not focused enough on uh, seeing the landing, but I don't think so, because it felt quite smooth. So without further ado, we have arrived. We're now going to taxi into the terminal, and you would be able to see a bit of the terminal. We would turn to the right as we would park over towards the general aviation or the private jet area, more or less, you can say. Of course, we could continue to the end where some other private jets are, but I think we would park into the general aviation, because we don't have any connection with any companies or such here in the airport, so that might be the safest way. Okay, and we can switch off the strobe lights. Have to see here, wing inspection lights is not on. We can switch off the landing lights here. We got the taxi lights on still. Can switch up here. You can still see our ground speed on my panel up there. You can see we have 3 degrees Celsius outside at the moment, and the wind down to only 3 knots right now, so I guess it would be pretty simple that it was safe operation. Of course, it would have been easier just to have made the straight-in approach. Of course it would have been, but that's one of the main things would explain that the information you get. But that's not X-Plane's fault. That's actually when the weather engine is loading the weather. So no blame there. We got the main terminal, and as far as I remember, there are some clocks or watches, you can say, over here. They're not active right now, but I actually mean the developer has made a fix so they actually could show the local time in reality. But I mean, you have to go to his forum or something like that actually to get those files. But we are going to turn in here, park beside the other private jet we got in here. And then we call it the flight for today. I really hope you enjoyed the flight today with us here from that was too close, from Edinburgh and here to Aalborg. We're just going to make a large turn here to opposite direction. It does not turn that well. You see, even though I have it, sometimes feels a bit odd, but also it is difficult with the engines to get it rolling, because it actually requires quite some thrusts in order to roll. But it can also be the ground here that makes it a bit more complicated to actually turn. But we would turn around here and then leave the aircraft here under the light, more or less, and then it was it for this flight. Yeah, I really hope you enjoyed it, and it was informatively, because that's also something that I actually am working on to actually make it useful. Besides, I'm actually flying, because to me that is very important as well, that you perhaps learn something as well, because that would just be good for you. If I can teach you or say something that you did not think about, or whatever it could be. Now I should not sound like something that just knows everything, because I do not. But thank you for watching, and hope to see you again soon. Bye bye.